Hello, Peter. Welcome to Conversation with CAVACH. For people who do not know about Peter Friedrich, he is an author and an activist. He specializes in analysis of historical and current affairs in South Asia. He's actively involved in issues ranging from human rights to politicization of religion to state-sponsored atrocities. He has lectured in Columbia University, Stanford University, St. Stephen's College, and several other premier universities. Today, he is here to talk to us about the RSS, or the Sangh Parivar. He has been working in this topic from 2017, and he has published over 20 articles on this topic. In fact, recently he has published a book on this topic called Saffron Fascists, India's Hindu Nationalist Rulers. So now, thank you, Peter, for talking to us again. So my first question to you is, so we are seeing all over the world, there is a crackdown on democracy and human rights. So be it the US, India, China, Belarus, all these countries. What I think is unique about the crackdown of democracy in India is that it is related to the RSS or the Sangh Parivar. So firstly, do you agree with this theory? And can you begin with like a short summary of what is the Sangh Parivar, what is the RSS? And in your views, how are they responsible for the crackdown of democracy in India?
Yes. So as you mentioned, we've seen this growing crackdown on democracy around the world under a lot of these right-wing regimes. One of the primary differences, though, that we see in India is that India's crackdown is inspired by, it's led by this 95-year-old paramilitary. It's one of the largest, most overtly fascist organizations in the world. And it has a particular ideological goal that I believe differs from the circumstances in a lot of these other countries. In India, you have this group, as you referred to, the Sangh Parivar, which is an umbrella term for the RSS and its many subsidiaries. The RSS was founded in 1925. It's all male. It's paramilitary. It's uniformed. And it has estimated 6 million members currently. I say estimated because nobody really knows for sure and they don't make that information public. It has, as the Sangh Parivar, of which the RSS is the mother organization, it has subsidiaries that are in the religious field, the field of politics, in the field of universities, for organizations for students, for attorneys, for tech workers, for a wide range of fields. They basically have a special interest subsidiary for pretty much every field that you can think of. And as this organization has developed over the past 95 years, it's developed with this specific goal of establishing what's called a Hindu Rashtra, or a Hindu nation, with this underlying belief that that India is a Hindu nation, and that anybody that is in India that's a non-Hindu is and should be treated as a foreigner. And so in practical terms, in practicality, that means that they have a goal of eliminating or dominating non-Hindus in the country, particularly Christians and Muslims. And as far as the way that they have attempted to conduct a takeover of democracy or a twisting of democracy in India, we've really seen that in the past 5 years, since 2014, when the BJP, the political wing of the RSS, came to power. And since then, there's actually an example that stood out to me over the years from 2-3 years ago, where a teacher in a region of India had posted on social media that voting for Modi, the BJP prime minister, is like garlanding a dog. And while one might, disagree with the efficacy of making such a statement, within a democracy where we have free speech, we're usually free to make such a statement. This teacher, however, was subsequently arrested, investigated for his remarks. And we're seeing really a growing rise of this sort of treatment, increasingly so over the past couple of years. I would say that at this point, under Modi's regime, which is essentially an RSS regime, that social justice is being jailed in India. We most recently have seen the wide arrest of academics who are known for their criticism of Hindu nationalism. Last year, after the annexation of Kashmir, which was a long-standing goal of the RSS, we saw the mass arrest of the entire civil society, politicians, religious leaders, business people, journalists, most of whom still remain behind bars well over a year later without having had charges brought against them or without being brought to trial. And so we see this growing, developing environment in India under this RSS regime where there's no room for freedom of expression, there's no room for dissent, there's no room for exercising basic democratic rights.
Okay, you mentioned about the subsidiaries of the RSS. What is interesting is they also have a subsidiary for Muslims.
Yes.
So how do you explain that contradiction? So even though they are very overtly anti-Muslim, but they have a subsidiary through which they can claim that any such criticism is false. So can you comment a little bit on this?
Yes, so notably, this gentleman, V.D. Savarkar, in the 1920s, who coined this term Hindutva, which is a religious nationalist political ideology, and which is Hindutva, which is the underlying ideology of the RSS. V.D. Savarkar specifically said that Indian Muslims were comparable to German Jews, a remark he actually made in 1938, I believe about a month after Kristallnacht, the first Nazi pogrom against the Jews. So if you fast forward to 2002, in 2002, in the state of Gujarat, when Modi was the chief minister of the state, there was an anti-Muslim pogrom conducted in which the BJP, the RSS, and a variety of Sangh Parivar entities, subsidiaries, were the driving force behind taking to the streets and massacring Muslims. In total, they killed approximately 2,000 Muslims. That was in March 2002, and that resulted in a huge amount of bad publicity, bad press for the RSS, which is one of the most overtly Islamophobic, virulently Islamophobic organizations in the world. Then you fast forward from March 2002 to December 2002. December 2002 is when this organization, the Muslim Rashtriya Manch, the Muslim wing of the RSS, was founded. And I would say that it's rather a common sense explanation to consider that this organization, which is really a very minor part of the RSS, was founded specifically to provide some damage control and some kind of an excuse, as it's currently widely used today, that no, of course the RSS is not Islamophobic. No, of course they're not anti-Muslim. Look, they have a Muslim wing. But really, when considering this wing, one has to take into context the history of the time and how this wing was founded just about 6-9 months after this major anti-Muslim pogrom by the RSS.
Okay. Now, the last chapter in your book is called Loom of Genocide in India. Now, there might be critics who would say that, yes, the condition of democracy in India is very bad, but naming a chapter Looming Threat of Genocide might be a little bit of a hyperbole. So what do you have to say to such critics who might say that?
Well, there have been at least 2 genocide watches issued for India over the past year and a half, I believe. One for Assam, one for Kashmir. In Kashmir, the reason is because after the annexation of Kashmir on 5 August 2019, and the massive increase in troop presence, the ongoing lockdown of Kashmir, there are very legitimate worries about what is going to happen to the Kashmiri people who, since this annexation, since this lockdown, have been utterly stripped of all democratic rights, of even freedom of movement within their own home, and who are now living in an area which is essentially a black hole in the world. There's very little media coverage, very little knowledge of what's actually happening in Kashmir and has been happening there for the past year. In Assam, the BJP RSS regime has followed through with implementing what's called a National Register of Citizens, where they went through and they required everybody in Assam to prove that they're a citizen in order to be able to remain in the state, in the country. And in doing so, as an end result, there were approximately 1.9 million people who were left off the list. Now, the BJP RSS's goal for these people is to either eject them from the country or to incarcerate them in concentration camps, which have already been built. The BJP RSS has already built concentration camps, detention camps in Assam, and begun populating them. And when you combine that with rhetoric that you've seen over the past year or so from top BJP RSS leaders like Amit Shah, who's Home Secretary for the country now, and the former president of the BJP, who referred to people in this area in Assam as potential infiltrators, as termites who need to be taken and thrown out of the country, thrown into the Sea of Bengal. When you consider also that the RSS has a long stated goal since its origins of eliminating Christians and Muslims from the country. When you consider also that RSS leaders in the 1930s and 1940s were praising Nazi racial policy towards the Jews and saying it was a good lesson to learn and profit by. When you consider that the RSS is responsible for every major anti-minority program in the country since 1947, when you consider that Modi is currently the Prime Minister of India, and he rose to power specifically after 2002, when his administration and the organization to which he belongs, the RSS, staged this pogrom against Muslims in Gujarat. And then when you consider also that just a few months ago in February in New Delhi, there was an anti-Muslim pogrom, which followed after a BJP leader, prominent BJP leader in the city, called for removal of Muslims after BJP leaders were calling to, quote unquote, shoot the traitors who were dissenting against the regime. When you consider that this anti-Muslim pogrom in New Delhi occurred just in February, approximately 50 people were killed. There were stories of police joining the mob in New Delhi, the capital of the country, joining the mob and going door to door, kicking down doors, grabbing people from their homes, Muslims from their homes, and turning them over to the mob. When you consider all of this, there's a serious concern, a very legitimate concern that's far past hyperbole about the potential for about a looming threat of genocide in India.
Okay. In the book, you have really taken on RSS. And RSS, as well as the BJP, they are a very vindictive group of people. So them and also their followers, they do not let go of things. So I'm just curious to know, did you face any backlash prior to publishing the book or after the book was published, or in general, because you have written around 20 articles on the RSS or the Sangh Parivar? What kind of backlash have you faced living in the US for such criticism of the Sangh Parivar?
Well, when I published the book, almost immediately, there was a surge in people going on Amazon, where I'm selling the book, and haven't bought the book. Obviously, I haven't read the book, just automatically giving it 1-star reviews. And then some news started coming out through social media that there was a an attempt to develop a systematic campaign to get the book delisted from Amazon, to send people to give it poor reviews, this sort of thing. So I've seen that. But if I trace back before I published the book, last year I was actually protested here in California, my home state. And I was actually protested by the HSS, which is the international wing of the RSS. What happened was that I published an article in a prominent Indian magazine about how this congresswoman from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard, has been propped up by the RSS and has been carrying water for them throughout her career. As a result, another congressman from California named Ro Khanna issued a statement affirming the article and declaring that it's the duty of every Hindu politician, of every American Hindu politician, to reject Hindutva, this religious nationalist political ideology. And that then inspired a group of about 30 members of the HSS to go and protest the congressman at one of his constituent events. And when they were protesting him, they were essentially protesting me by assembling outside of his constituent event, displaying signs with my picture on it, and simply protesting the fact that he had affirmed my article and come out against Hindutva as a result of what I had written. So I have enjoyed that. I've had throughout my activism over the past year, I've had a number of overt and not so overt threats. I've had people attempting to report me to the FBI, or this sort of thing, simply because I'm writing about Hindu nationalism and the RSS in India. I've had a few things like that.
Okay, so you were born in the US. You could have led a much happier life if you wouldn't have criticized the RSS or the Sangh Parivar. So I'm very curious to know what got your interest in this topic enough that you criticize it to this extent and get all this backlash, where you could have just lived by completely ignoring it because it really has no role in your life per se.
Well, I would say, first of all, is that I actually do consider that I am leading quite a happy life, and more than that, a rewarding life, in which I feel very content and satisfied that I'm doing the right thing, and I'm working on something that matters. As far as what would inspire me to get involved in this. So I would say two things. One would link back to my childhood. And in my childhood, I grew up on really a steady diet of reading books, fiction and history, nonfiction, about the Second World War and about the rise of fascism in Europe, about Nazism, and this sort of thing. And related to that, watching a lot of films, documentaries, and Hollywood films, this sort of thing, about the issue. And as I grew up, that's one thing that has really stuck with me since my childhood, as a result, a product of this steady diet as a child, is just this intense gut hatred for fascism. And that's one thing. So another thing I would say, where this issue of the RSS specifically really hit home, is that I was protesting Modi in California, in my home state, in 2015. Modi had come to San Jose, California, for one of a number of mega receptions, rock star receptions, which have been hosted for him in America by international affiliates of the RSS. And I was outside of the venue. I was there holding signs, protesting throughout the day. There was a lot of police presence. There were a lot of other protesters. And there were a lot of supporters of Modi as well, all in the streets, all kind of mingled together. And two incidents happened during the day. One, earlier in the day, somebody just ran up out of nowhere and just snatched a sign out of my hand and ran off. And this was in full view of the police, who were maybe 10, 20 meters away from me. And I turned to the police and informed them what had happened. And they basically told me, there's nothing we can do. And then the second incident was later that night. There was the venue, and then there was an overflow area set up outside the venue where I was at, with a screen set up so that people could watch the event that was going on inside. It was dusk, and Modi had just come on stage inside, and his image was being beamed onto the screen outside. And I was there along with other protesters holding my signs still. And I had gotten close to the screen. And a man easily twice my size, a supporter of Modi, while I was there, started coming up and basically muscling up on me and pushing his body up against me, shoving me, and then at one point, as I distinctly recall, basically saying to me, whispering to me, that he will break me. And so I continued standing there for a few more minutes. And then shortly after, some other people rushed up and snatched both of the signs out of my hands and ran off. And at that point, I left. And that just left a really, really strong impression on me that here I am, I'm protesting somebody who's not from my country. He's a foreign politician. I'm in my home state. I'm exercising my freedom of speech, which is constitutionally guaranteed to me. I'm peaceful. And these people who are supporters of a foreign politician who's affiliated, who's a member of this fascist RSS organization, who is implicated as responsible for a pogrom, who is all of these things, these supporters of a foreign politician are able to come up and threaten me, assault me, intimidate me, seize my signs and disrupt my ability to exercise my freedom of speech. They're able to do that with impunity in my own home state. And so I would say that really left an impression on me, that is a galvanizing factor that has driven me, among other things, to pursue this issue of the RSS.
So from where do you think these members of the Sangh Parivar get the courage to misbehave even when they are outside of India? So in India, it's still understandable right now in the sense that BJP is in power and they do have some kind of protection. But from where do you think they get this audacity or the courage or this idea that they can also misbehave in the US and get away with it? From where do you think they have this kind of courage?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly, I would say at least one place that they probably get this courage is from the fact that so much of this violence, so many of these pogroms, lynchings, assassinations, bombings, terrorist actions that are committed by the RSS and its affiliates in India go unpunished and are met with impunity. And really, the only reward that is dealt to anybody that's involved in these kinds of atrocities is increased power. They don't get any punishment. The only punishment they get is an increase in power in India. And so I would say that globally, that's an underlying factor that gives a sense of courage, a sense of invincibility to affiliates of this group. As far as why in the U.S. or abroad in Europe, I would also say that the fact that most of this occurs in a mob environment would also tend to give them a lot of courage.
Okay. So in one of your articles, you have spoken about how RSS operates as a state within a state, and that it is essentially a shadow government. So can you elaborate a little bit on this? That what do you mean by it is a shadow government? Do you mean the fact that BJP is in power in India right now, or something even more important or more crucial than that?
Well, the BJP is the political wing of the RSS. It was founded in 1980 by two RSS pracharaks, which is a term meaning full-time workers who are dedicated to the cause. They're usually unmarried. They go where they're told. They're cogs in the wheel that develop the RSS. So the BJP was founded by these two RSS full-time workers in 1980. Since then, when it came to power in 2014, it came to power with Modi as the prime minister. Modi is a lifelong member since the age of 8 of the RSS. He joined when he was 8 years old. And when he was 21, he became a RSS pracharak, a full-time worker for the RSS. When he was 37, he was assigned by the RSS to work within the BJP. He is a tool of the RSS and has been groomed by the RSS for decades. Beyond that, now with Modi's government, the BJP government in India, 75% of the cabinet ministers are RSS members. And that includes the people in all of the most important portfolios in the cabinet, including the Home Minister, the Defense Minister, the Minister of Law and Justice, the Minister of Education, Transportation, and so forth. And what the BJP has done, as it's been in power over the past 5 years, is it has repeatedly conducted these summits with the RSS, where the BJP government meets with the RSS to discuss what its policies are going to be, and to basically get RSS sign-off, RSS approval from the policies that the BJP implements. Everything that the BJP has done in the past 5 years, past 6 years, especially over the past year or two, since the annexation of Kashmir, the passage of this verdict regarding this temple in Ayodhya, the passage of this Citizenship Amendment Act in December of last year, all of this has been part of the long-standing agenda of the RSS. And so what we're really seeing is, as the BJP is in power in India since 2014, what they're doing is they're implementing the agenda of the RSS. The people, the BJP politicians who are in power, who are controlling the government, are vast majority all RSS members. The BJP, at least openly, we only can guess at what they're doing covertly, but at least openly, is holding these summits with the RSS to discuss policy about all sorts of issues. The RSS is operating as the shadow government of India.
The Ayodhya verdict by the Supreme Court, would you consider that as an example of RSS acting as a shadow government? Mm-hmm. And as someone who has been following the trajectory of the RSS and the BJP for years, was this surprising even for you when on the 5th of August, our Prime Minister inaugurated the temple, which was built at the site of a mosque, which was demolished, and during that riot, it killed around more than 24 or 25 Muslims on the record. So even for someone who has studied the RSS and the BJP, was this very surprising to you, or do you see this as a logical conclusion to what the BJP has started doing in India?
I think that's more accurate, as I see it as a logical conclusion towards what the BJP RSS has been doing in India. So in 1992, you had this mosque which stood on this disputed religious site in Ayodhya, Uttar Pradesh, the Uttar Pradesh being the most populous state in India. And over a period of a couple of years prior to 1992, the BJP and the RSS had mobilized mobs to demand demolition of this mosque. And as they were mobilizing these mobs, one of the key people involved in mobilizing the mobs was actually Modi himself, who was then a full-time worker in the RSS. And he worked with the president of the BJP, galvanized these mobs who ultimately in 1992 destroyed this mosque. Just hundreds of thousands of people surrounded it, tore it down. And as an outcome of that, over the next couple of months, there were riots, pogroms around the country where up to 2,000 or 3,000 Muslims throughout the country were killed. Subsequently, that was in 1992. Subsequently, this issue has been in the courts. The courts have been deciding, well, who does this site belong to? And ultimately, at the end of last year, the courts came out with this verdict that declared that the demolition of the mosque was a crime, but that the site should be handed over to the Hindu religion, although technically the entity that the courts handed over the site to is an RSS controlled entity. And then a few months passed, bringing us up to the current day, where on 5 August, Modi went and at this disputed site where back in 1992, decades ago, he had led the mob that tore down the mosque at that very same site. Now 5 August 2020, Modi is there and he lays the foundation stone for this new temple. So when he was doing that, what I would say is that people should consider that it's very symbolic of how this issue, this laying of the foundation stone, this establishment of this new temple, has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with politics. That you see this consistent thread over decades of Modi himself being involved in the destruction of the mosque, and then now in the laying of the foundation stone atop the site where the mosque was, that he helped galvanize the mob to destroy. And it's a symbolic thing. It was deeply symbolic that they chose the date, which they didn't have to choose, of 5 August, which is the 1-year anniversary of the annexation of Kashmir, which is the only Muslim majority region in India, and that this laying of the foundation stone was like setting a seal of approval on this anti-Muslim, Islamophobic wave of hatred that has been stirred up by the RSS, by the BJP, and by Modi for the past several decades.
Okay, so in your book, which you have called The Saffron Fascists, so you're referring to the Sangh Parivar as the saffron fascists, if I'm not mistaken. So who would you say are your target readers of this book? And I mean, is there any reason why you thought that now is a good time for you to write this book? And who would you wish should definitely read the book?
Well, target readers and those that I wish would definitely read the book are non-Indians, people in the West, people who have an interest in fascism and being in anti-fascism, people who have an interest in upholding democratic rights, people who have an interest in seeing minority rights protected, people who are interested in history, politics, and current events outside of India. I hope that this book can serve as a basic primer, an introduction, something that's easily accessible for people who are not previously familiar with the situation in India, specifically with the way in which this Hindu nationalist movement and the RSS has risen to dominate the country.
Okay, so with this, we reach the end of the first part of this interview. In the second part, my colleague Sharik will be talking to Peter about the influence of the RSS and the Sangh Parivar outside of India.